tggmods.com. tggmods is one of the best store in what most would call a gamer's paradise. They have a great variety of cheats for games like Red Dead Redemption 2, 5M, GTA 5, Cs2, Rainbow Six Siege, recoveries, game accounts, Spotify accounts, and much more. All backed up with various payment methods to select from with an instant delivery service at the most cheapest prices out there. You can also join the Discord server with the links in the description for support, giveaways, and much more. Links to tggmods website and Discord server will be in the description, guys. Enjoy the video.
What's up, guys? So today we're gonna be checking out Memesense, starting with the basics on making a guide on how to configure its aimbot, and then moving on to some Prime Matchmaking with the same configuration to check out its performance. Going into the legit bot section, here you see many options, with the first being master switch option, of which I recommend you keep as always on. Onto the right, you can see weapon selection between all weapon, per groups, or per weapon, of which I recommend you have it set to per groups. Jumping right into the general category, here we have the enable toggle, of which I recommend turning it on. Right below it, we have the aim key, of which you set a bind, and I'm recommending your fire key button, which is left click. Make sure to set the type key on key down as well. Right beside it, we have aimbot modes between always and trace. I recommend you set it to trace, as always is far more blatant. Moving over to the bottom, we have draw FOV, which I recommend turning it on for now, as we are setting up the aimbot. Below it, we have aim time, which I recommend leaving it off. Right below it, we have multiple clickable categories, being aim, accuracy, RCS, misc, which upon clicking will bring up their own options. So let's set these up one by one. Into the aim category, starting with the radius type, of which I recommend setting this on static. Below it, we have the radius, or in other words, FOV, and this you can set anywhere from 0.1 to 3 of value, as going over that will not be considered legit cheating due to it being too blatant. I like to keep mine at 1.2, so I recommend you use that value as well. Moving on, we have the smooth type, of which I'd recommend you to set it to dynamic mode. Below it, we have smooth, pitch, and yaw, which are essentially smoothing for legit cheating purposes. I highly recommend not to go below a value of 3, as in doing so, it would not only be too blatant, but you run the risk of triggering the anti-cheat, which will ban you. I like to keep the value anything above 6, so I recommend you start with the value of 6 for both and adjust accordingly. Remember, the higher your radius or FOV, the more smoothing you need. Moving on to the accuracy category, starting with the first, we have shot delay type, which I recommend setting this to automatic. Right below it, we have the target switch delay, of which I recommend a value of 250. Moving on, we have the hit chance type, minimum hit chance, and minimum damage options, of which is of no use in legit cheating, so I recommend keeping them off as it is. Heading over to the RCS category, starting with the first option being enable, which I recommend turning it on. Below it, we have disable on auto weapons, which I recommend leaving it off. Next, we have start on first bullet, of which I recommend leaving it on if you are new to legit cheating, and off if you know how to legit cheat. Moving on, we have custom radius, which I recommend leaving it off. Then we have custom smooth, which I recommend setting its mode to dynamic and it to 1 on X and Y sliders. Below it, we have smooth pitch and yaw, which I recommend not going below a value of 3 on both. Going into the miss section, starting with air check, which I recommend leaving it on if you're new to legit cheating, smoke check, which I recommend leaving it on, flash check, which I recommend leaving it on if you're new, target air check, which I recommend leaving it off, and ignore frozen players, which I recommend leaving it on. Moving over to the right of the menu, we have more categories. Going into the hit group section and into the selection, we have values for hit and body scale, of which I recommend leaving it as it is. Right beside it, we have target hitbox group, of which I recommend to turn everything on, with the exception being arms and legs for pistols, rifles, shotguns, and so on. The only weapon group that you will have all hitboxes turned on, including arms and legs, would be snipers. Moving over to the bottom, we have some options which I recommend keeping them disabled, with the only exception being body aim if lethal, turned on if you're new to legit cheating. Below it, we have target selection, of which I recommend you to turn on players unless you're chicken hunting. Moving over to the last category, being the auto fire and auto wall, I recommend to leave everything in these off, as they are rage features and should not be used for legit cheating cheating purposes. I'm going to be setting up other groups of weapons in the legit bot section, of which you can watch the process, but since it will be sped up, I recommend slowing the video down on YouTube if you're interested in copying these settings. Moving over to the aim assist section, which is the Triggerbot section, at the top you can see the master switch, which I recommend keeping it always on. Right beside it we have weapon groups, which I recommend setting it to all weapons, as Triggerbot works the same across all weapons when you're legit cheating. Moving over to the trigger category, we have the enable toggle, of which I recommend setting a bind to it and have the type set to on key down. Below it we have through wall toggle, which you should leave it off and never enable. Right below that we have some more toggles which I recommend enabling: air check, flash check, smoke check toggles if you're new to legit cheating. Moving on, we have the ignore breakables toggle, which I recommend leaving it off. Next up, we have lock camera after shot and delay between shots, of which I recommend leaving those values at 0 as it is. Moving on, we have the hit chance type, of which I recommend setting it to spread. Now onto the visible category, we have hit groups, which I recommend having head, chest, and stomach hitboxes selected. Moving over, we have the minimum damage, which I recommend setting its value to 18. Below it, we have the reaction time slider, of which I recommend setting its value at 5. Onto the right side, we have the RCS category, which is for the Triggerbot when it's active, of which I recommend enabling it. Below it, we have return crosshair, which I recommend leaving it off. Next up, we have bullet start, which I recommend its value at 1. Then we have bullet end, which I recommend its value at 30. And on the X and Y sliders, I recommend a value of 1. Moving over to the auto pistol category, of which I recommend enabling and setting its value to 30. Now that we're done with the aimbot section all configured, I'll be moving on to setting up visuals, which are pretty self-explanatory and easy to set up. I'll be speeding up this process majorly, so for those who are interested, I recommend slowing the video down on YouTube. Alright guys, let's get into a match and see how this config performs. And for those who are interested, I will be sharing the config code in the description.
आखिरी बंदा बी पे क्या गिरा नहीं मार पा रहे इसको अरे नहीं टैग नहीं क्यों कैंसिल क्यों हो गया
नेटवर्क इंटरप्शन
ये क्या क्या हो रहा है भाई CS2
मिडफील्डर को लेके चले गया। ये तो लेजिट कर रहा है, मजा आएगा। रडार?
हाँ
क्या हुआ?
इसका रडार काम कर रहा है?
हाँ काम तो करता है डोरा।
जॉब क्या होता है? हैं? हेलो? नहीं 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 क्या होता है?
Seller that you've been looking for. Quality, guarantee, customer service on point. He's the one that's got the market in the chokehold, no doubt. So don't get it twisted, don't get it wrong. tggmods is the one, that's where you belong. The best seller on the market today. tggmods the name, up to this day.